transition to an awesome guy. His name is Nathan McPherson. Nathan McPherson is a second generational, constitutional, and he beats the IRS. He's a tax attorney, second generation, I said, and he's volunteering his time. He's been traveling around the state with me on his own expenses, and I really just want to say, you guys, this guy is awesome, and we're really, really fortunate to have him, so please welcome Nathan McPherson.
Shortly revisit the question why we're here. We've heard some of the concerns, data protection, concerns for our children, their future, their education. And remember the overarching question, what is the purpose of education? Keep that in your mind as we go through this. Why I'm here, that's my father. I'm a second generation tax defense attorney, as she said. And my father started the law firm I'm now taking over, so I'm carrying on the baton in that respect. And also my mother, when I was a small child, was fighting the infiltration of communism and secular humanism into the school system in Arizona about 35 years ago. Her parents were both public school educators, and my mother has a degree in elementary education with a minor in special education. My brother is history department chair at Bethany Lutheran College in Minnesota and was recently nominated for the presidency of another college. So education runs deep in my family. Also here, of course, because of my children and their futures, and especially for my grandchildren, that they might be born into a constitutional republic and not into communism. And of course, thank you. And of course, it's my duty to our Creator to proclaim the truth, and we'll see in the Declaration of Independence the source of our rights. Overall, we could sum this up that we are all here to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, which is, of course, the purpose of our Constitution. Well, as we've seen a little bit, and we'll see more in depth, the Common Core is violating the Constitution, both the U.S. Constitution and the state Constitution. Violates federal and state laws. The representative mentioned the law passed a year ago in Alaska, a state law prohibiting DEEP from spending money on Common Core. Now we have these tests coming up that aren't free, obviously, and are mandated, as we saw, but from the federal government, the Common Core tests. That right there appears to violate that state law, not to mention all the other expenses being paid to implement Common Core in Alaska. And not only does it violate these things, but it is subverting the Constitution. Anybody want to define the word subvert? What does it mean to subvert the Constitution? Yes, sir. Undermining, correct. And also usurping parental rights and state rights. As we'll see, the Supreme Court has held, U.S. Congress has held, that the right, or the duty, I should say, to educate children lies first and foremost with the parents. The states then have a role to support the parents. The federal government has a very limited role, if any role, that's even debated. So, to take a step back, why does the Constitution matter? I'm going to talk about this violating and undermining the Constitution. Who cares? Does anybody in here care? Okay, you all do. And anybody who's seen my presentations before knows the answer. What's in my hand here? Water bottle. Okay. So what do I want? I want a piece of plastic. I want this label. No, I want the water, right? So why am I holding a piece of plastic then, actually? Because it's the container for the water, right? If I don't have this plastic around it, I don't have any water. The water would be on the floor and useless, right? So this bottle provides the context that makes the content, the water inside, useful. Without the plastic around it, I don't have any water, I can't drink the water. That's the same thing with our Constitution. It provides the structure, the due process to secure our freedom. Without the Constitution, we don't even have a country, because the Constitution is the document that created the United States of America. The Alaska State Constitution created the state of Alaska. Without the Constitution, we don't have anything. We especially don't have liberty. Well, our federal Constitution sets up a Republic of the United States. So this case, the Supreme Court case, is talking about separation of two spheres. Any guesses as to these two spheres? What are the two spheres? Yes, the state and the federal government. Protections of liberty. Again, the Constitution's structural protections of liberty. Well, like I mentioned, here's a laundry list of all of the different aspects of the U.S. Constitution violated by the Common Core, state constitution, federal law, and state law. But don't take my word for it. You have one of the handouts here is the federal lawsuit where Governor Jindal of Louisiana, on behalf of the state, sued the U.S. Department of Education and the Secretary, Arne Duncan, alleging these exact violations that I'm presenting here today. These two gentlemen were the General Counsel and Deputy General Counsel of the U.S. Department of Education under Bush II. They wrote a white paper, the title there, saying exactly this, that Common Core is federal executive tyranny, violates the Constitution, violates federal statutes written by U.S. Congress, and is usurping our 10th Amendment rights, just the same allegations the governor raised in his lawsuit. And this third case was actually brought by parents in Missouri, and it was just decided about a month ago that held part of the Common Core unconstitutional and in violation of federal and Missouri state law. And that aspect that was held already by a court to be unconstitutional in violation of law is SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. And you'll recall a few moments ago, Representative Reinbold said that Governor Parnell and Commissioner Hanley got Alaska into SBAC, this organization, this consortium that was just held unconstitutional. And now we're not in that, we're in a very similar thing with the University of Kansas. So on to the 10th Amendment. Everybody remember what the 10th Amendment guarantees? That whatever powers we the people do not specifically delegate to the federal government are reserved to us and to the states. While President Jefferson, the major author of the Declaration of Independence, who had a lot of input into the Bill of Rights and the rest of the Constitution, was a big proponent of public education, as many in here I'm sure are. But he said when he was president, he was speaking to the House and Senate of the U.S., it's a great thing, public education, but we'd have to do what if we, the federal government, wanted to do something about it? Have to amend the Constitution, because it's not in there. They don't have the authority. And U.S. Congress even agreed with him in the 1960s, 1965 with the two statutes on education, and in 1979 on the Department of Education Organizing Act that created the U.S. Department of Education, which is a bit ironic that U.S. Congress says we don't have anything to do with education, that's why we're creating the U.S. Department of Education. But in any event, right, specifically they said these standards, curriculum assessments, those even with these laws about education, we still don't have authority over that. And the Supreme Court has made clear what? That they can do it anyway? They may not compel the states. Now what does that mean to compel the states? To push it on them, say, if you want our money, you're going to do what we say. There are several Supreme Court cases that say this, starting back in the 1920s and going through. This is a more recent one, 97. Anybody recognize that guy? It's kind of hard to see here. Sheriff Mack, he was up here about a year ago. Anybody see him talk? Sheriff Richard Mack? Yeah, he did. He sued the Clinton administration, along with Prince, who was a sheriff from Montana, Sheriff Mack from my home state of Arizona, where I was born. When they tried to, the federal government tried to have the sheriffs and local law enforcement implement the Brady Bill on the background checks before buying guns. They took it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, federal government, you can't do that. You can't hijack the state executive and make them do what you want. Well, who in the state is implementing Common Core? Because it's not federal agents in our schools, right? So who's doing it here? And it's not, Representative Reinbold's not, the legislature passed a law banning the Common Core, right? It's the state executive, isn't it? But maybe the state executive wanted to agree to it and said, hey, this is a great thing, Common Core By the way, are we doing Common Core in Alaska? Yes, so you all have been convinced probably by the letter that our Commissioner of Education wrote to the U.S. Department of Education saying we are? Okay, pretty convincing, huh? So maybe the Department of Education thinks Common Core is really great, so even though we know that the federal government can't force us to do it, we think it's good for the kids, so let's do it anyway. Is that okay? What are the red letters there? Cannot be ratified by the consent of state officials. They don't have the authority to do that. So even if the state executive thinks it's a really good thing, they want to do it, they don't have the authority to. Now why is that? Again, the federal government can't do it because of the power reserved to the states. The state may not agree to it because the 10th Amendment protects our rights. We the people have 10th Amendment rights. We the people have standing to sue in court to enforce these rights. These rights belong to us, the people, not to the state, not to the federal government, to the people. On to the Compacts Clause. Anybody here heard of the Compacts Clause before all this? I didn't remember it, and I'm a constitutional lawyer. Well, I'm glad they put that in there. Well, what the Compacts Clause is in a nutshell is the states may not agree with one another, enter into contracts without the consent of U.S. Congress. And why is that? The federal Constitution says the states are coming together to form a Republic of the United States. Now, if a couple of states get together and make their own little agreements, and then maybe the Northwest states will agree on something, the Southeast states and the Northeast, then all of a sudden we don't have one constitutional republic of 50 United States, we'll have a couple little clusters. We ran into that problem right in 1800s, right? That's why that's in there. Well, it's a good thing for Common Core, or for the people respecting Common Core as well, because that's what SBAC was held to violate, that provision of the Constitution. Again, U.S. Congress didn't approve Common Core, U.S. Congress didn't approve these consortia. U.S. Congress, in fact, passed 3 laws that says the federal government doesn't have anything to do with this. It's once again executive tyranny, both at the federal level and at the state level, because remember, the Alaska legislature also prohibited spending on Common Core, and yet the Alaska state executive is spending money on Common Core. One of the big things concerning parents, especially starting this coming week, is the data mining. And many people will remember the 4th Amendment protects our privacy rights. You have to have a search warrant, stuff like that, right? What about the 3rd Amendment? Anybody remember what's in the 3rd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? Quartering of troops. And why don't we want to have troops quartered in our houses? Is it because it costs a lot to feed them or something? We don't have enough beds? We can't do anything, right? What if, when you're having breakfast or dinner with your family, you have an armed government agent at the table? How's that dinner table conversation going to be? Yeah, you're not going to be talking about how you don't like Common Core, are you? Okay, so what if your child goes to a school with armed guards? I don't know if Alaska has those, but other states, I heard in Michigan, you got those metal detectors. I met a guy on the ferry. And then little Johnny or Susie's given this test. How old were you when you first held a gun? How many guns do your parents have? What's in your medicine cabinet at home? Your parents use drugs? Do they drink? Sounds like the same thing, doesn't it? Well, the Secretary of Education wants to build a system, and he actually already has, now, to track little Johnny all the way up to his earnings as an adult. So, I've got my transcripts before. Anybody in here ever gotten your transcripts from your school? And when you got those, did it say how much you made every year since you graduated? Why not? They don't collect that. Well, they didn't used to, right? So that's what he wants to collect. So how are they going to do that? What did we just say? This data system in Alaska is based on which data system now? Permanent fund dividend that has your Social Security number, right? That sends you a 1099, sends one to the IRS as well, to tell them how much PFD you got.